Welcome to the Next Level Life podcast with Christine Corcoran. This podcast is made for the powerhouse businesswomen who are ready to ignite their fullest potential. This is where we will dive deep into the mindset breakthroughs and sprinkle in some kick up the butt motivation so you can scale your business with confidence and clarity. Whether you're craving more income, impact, or inspiration, this podcast will be your ultimate resource for all things next level. Listen in as we have authentic conversations with game-changing female entrepreneurs as we reveal the secrets on what it takes to rise and thrive. So go ahead, ignite your inner fire, and let's get you taking massive aligned action. Are you ready to elevate? Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast. I am back home, back in Australia after my trip to LA. It was honestly so good. And I thought I would do a little episode sharing with you all my lessons and what I took away from the event. And how I run my business while traveling, just to give you a couple of tips and tricks that I put in place before I left, and also what I did while I was traveling just to stay on top of things within my business. But also, it wasn't that long. Like, it's not like I had to plan a lot because it was literally 12 days or something. It wasn't even that long. So, like, if you can't take 10 days off your business, then you probably don't actually have a business that can run without you. So I have my beautiful team that supports me, and I put some things in place, and I also was working throughout the time. So it was more of a work trip than a holiday anyway. So I want to talk to you about my lessons because it was such an incredible trip. I had so much fun and got to meet some incredible people and have made some amazing connections. And there were definitely some really powerful lessons that came through for me that have really resonated. And I've kind of like stewed on them for a couple of days before I share them with you on the podcast, because I want to get my head around everything that I took away, because I had conversations with so many people. I listened to some amazing speakers, got to have some great chats with some people that really shifted things for me, but also confirmed some other things for me. And so I really want to share with you my biggest takeaways. So one of my first biggest takeaways is to be prepared for an event like that. So I'm such a big believer of expanding your network, surrounding yourself with incredible people, surrounding yourself with people who you want to become, because it helps you level up in so many ways. So firstly, the event was held at the Maybourne Hotel in Beverly Hills, which was already pretty swanky. It was very high level, incredible service, just absolutely stunning. The way that they took care of absolutely everything. Every little miniature detail was taken care of. It was so beautiful. They gave me an incredible little tour around the room once I checked in, showed me how to use everything because everything was like electronic, and just made me feel so at home. And so taken care of, like every little part of it was really well thought out. And it really made me think about everything. Like when it comes to service, obviously, like I stayed at 3 different hotels while I was away, and the service was very different from each one. And the price point, right, like there was probably like a huge jump with regards to the Beverly Hills one, because it was much more high value and high tier, whereas the hotel in Hawaii was more location based. So it was still expensive, but it was location based, and the service just was not there. And then I stayed in the Hilton in Santa Monica, and the service was actually really quite good there. And that was really beautifully manicured, and like the hotel was lovely there. But the Beverly Hills Maybourne was just absolutely stunning and on a whole other level. And it really made me think about everything from my experience of booking right through to my check-in, right through to how I was taken care of throughout my stay, how I checked out. Like every little minor detail was so beautifully thought of that it made me feel luxurious. It made me feel like I could really get used to this. This is so amazing. I got to bring home their slippers. Oh my God, they had a beautiful turn down service. They had, whenever I did room service, they brought it in with this table and this hot box where they would wait for you to be ready to eat, and then they would bring the food out of the hot box and then present it as if you were in a really high-end restaurant. It was really nice. And so there was just so many beautiful details. Like even there was such a contrast from the other hotels. Like even when I checked in Hawaii, it was quite warm in Hawaii, and there wasn't even water in the room. Like nothing, no finer detail like that. Like there was not even water in the room. That just like really annoyed me, because I'd just come off a long flight and I've already dehydrated, and that was the first thing that I really needed. And they didn't even have water upon check-in at the check-in desk. It was so busy. They actually tried to upsell me at the front desk in a really inauthentic way, and really unethical way, I think. And so I'm going to talk about that in another episode, because I want to talk about integrity in sales, because it was just gross. And yet with the Mayborn, like everything was so taken care of that I actually wanted to spend more money. Like I really wanted to be able to experience every part of the hotel. So I had a beautiful lunch at one of the restaurants and had breakfast at another restaurant and had drinks in the bar upstairs, which is a rooftop bar with an incredible view across the skyline of LA. And I wanted to hang out by the pool. Like there's just so much that I really wanted to make sure that I got the most out of experiencing the whole hotel. I didn't even get to see the spa, didn't even get to see the gym. Like there was so much that I didn't actually get to do because there was an event on that I obviously had to be a part of. So next time I'll definitely stay longer. So one of the things, like, it was just that contrast between the hotel in Hawaii and then stepping into the hotel in Beverly Hills and being like, oh, this is really beautiful. And so one of those things is really stepping in and experiencing things on a whole new level that help you think about things from a different perspective with regards to abundance. So the way that I approached the event back in February when I went to Arizona, I actually didn't stay in the hotel that they were hosting the event in, and I stayed at another place because of the price point, because the exchange rate was really low, and so that way it was very, very, like almost like triple, right, when it came to the Australian dollar. And so basically I was like, no, I won't spend that money on accommodation. I'll spend it on other things, because I was doing a little bit more traveling back then. And so this time around I was like, no, I want to stay at the hotel where the event is at. I don't want to have to travel back and forth. I want to make sure that I get to experience it. And when they put out the details of the hotel, Chris and Laurie, who created the events, they were like, we want you to stay at this hotel because we want you to experience a high level of abundance, right? And luxury, because you need to rewire that for yourself so you feel like it's your normal. And so I was like, I really wanted to experience that. And I was like, hell yeah, hell yeah, this can be my new norm. And so it just gives you a whole new level of experience. But it's not even just that, it's actually your ability to actually spend the money there and actually be in a place of abundance where I was like not stressing about the money. I was quite happily spending money around the hotel. And when I left, actually, they emailed me the bill, because they were like, would you like us to print out your charges? And I was like, no, I don't care, it's fine. And I left, and then the next day they emailed me the charges list, and I went through it and I was like, oh my God, I hardly spent any money because I was just probably just busy with the event and stuff. So funny. And I think like we can get so caught up in where we spend our money, but I'm such a big believer of spending it in places that will expand you. And that was one of my ones going into this. Okay, lesson number 1, be prepared for things to go well. Prior to leaving for the States, I really thought about this event differently to the way that I was preparing for the first event. The first event, I was super nervous about meeting everyone. I was super nervous. I didn't know who was going to be there. I did not know what to expect. So I went into it with a very nervous energy. Whereas this time around, I knew so many people that were going. I pre-organized to have drinks with one of the girls and dinner with another girl. And so I had messaged a couple of people to see whether they were going to be there. And they were like, yeah. And so I felt really good going into it. And I wasn't nervous. And so I prepared well ahead of time of like what I really wanted to get out of this event. And I sat down and I was chatting to my coach about this, about what my ask was going to be. Because in this environment, the way that Chris and Laurie have set it up is it's really about utilizing your networks and making sure that you communicate what it is that you're working on and what you need support with at that point in time, because you just never know who is in the room and who could possibly help you. And so I was like, I want to maximize this time, because I did not do it well last time. I had conversations with probably 15 people last time, and I didn't make notes, and I didn't really meet the right people, and I didn't really follow up as effectively as I could have. So this time I was like, I need to be prepared. So I prepared what my pitch was going to be. I prepared what my ask was going to be. And I also prepared other ways that I can further serve other people, because I was like, I want to be able to add value there as well. So I was just thinking about different ways of like, okay, so what do I have? Where do I have value to add, and how can I further serve people? And so I went in with those clear things in my mind, written down. So I was like, I'm so prepared to walk in and maximize this event. Now, there were 40 more people at this event compared to the January one. So I think it was like 120 people, which is quite a lot of people, and you cannot get around to 120 people. Insane, right? But being prepared allowed me to really hone my ask, and it also allowed me to really be clear on what it is that I was wanting. Whereas the first time around, I was so unsure because they just introduced it at the first event, like, we want you to have something to ask for. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm here for. And so I wasn't as prepared. So be prepared for things to go well. Now, things did go extremely well because my pitch was practiced and because my ask was really clear and specific. It was much easier for people to be like, oh, I know who I can connect you with. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. This is so good. And I got so many incredible connections. I've already booked quite a few podcast episodes where I'm being interviewed. Then I've also booked some amazing speakers on my podcast. So honestly, pay attention to the next few episodes that come out because of these next lot of interviews I've got coming for you are epic. These people are amazing and they're great at what they do. They've really built a really massive name for themselves and they've allowed their skill they're sharing their skills out with the world and they're just amazing. So these connections, I feel like only happened because I was able to not be nervous, be prepared with what I was asking for and go in with absolute, genuine, authentic intention to connect. Like I was really wanting to make sure that I was connecting with the right people, but also making sure that I was connecting from a place of wanting to connect rather than from a place of like, how do I get something from this, right? So, and they actually talked about this at the event because, when you look at your network as something you can take from, it's a completely different energy rather than thinking about like, how can I give? How can I add value in my network? How can I be seen as someone that adds value in my network? Because I want to be seen as a valuable person that other people want to connect me with. So I went in with a completely different energy this time and it really did pay off. And I'm going to talk about the follow-up and the connections in a minute, but just being prepared for it, I think really made such a huge difference. Okay. The next one is if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I think sometimes, especially in a room like that, the imposter syndrome can definitely show up. And it did show up for me. It showed up for a lot of other people. And I was like, if I don't make the most of this, then I'm going to regret that when I get home. And also, what's the worst thing that can happen? I was like, someone says no, or nothing happens. So I was like, okay, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I was literally like trying to be open to like, where can I ask? Where can I put myself forward with confidence and ask for what it is that I need? And so I was really clear with my ask. And I was also like finding other ways to ask for what I wanted because I feel like one of the conditionings that I've worked through myself and I still am working through as a woman, as someone that has grown up in with a religious background, I grew up Catholic and being the good girl. I feel like there's a lot of conditioning about not rocking the boat, about staying quiet, speak when you're spoken to, like not asking for what it is that I want. And so I've learnt, and there might be many other reasons why I've been conditioned in this way, but I've had this hard thing where I found it really hard to ask for what it is that I want. And I know that might seem really foreign coming from me because you might be like, oh, it seems like you ask for what you want and you go for what you want. Yes, I go for what I want and I work really hard and I create opportunities and results. Absolutely. But sometimes I can get caught up in the conditioning of staying quiet and not actually asking for what it is that I want. And it shows up in like the most really random places, like at a restaurant, instead of actually, saying to them that you got the meal wrong, like, can you please take this back? Or actually asking for a condiment in a restaurant. Or sometimes it was, asking for another drink, or just random little places that I noticed within myself as a solo traveler that I would get caught up in like, oh, no, don't ask. Like, you don't want to rock the boat. Like there was this internal pull or drive that was literally like, stay quiet. And it was really interesting over the time that I was away that I was like, okay, so how can I challenge this? Because if I don't ask, I'm not going to get what it is that I want. So how can I, instead of actually sitting there and being unhappy with not getting what it is that I want, how can I just actually push past that conditioning, have the courage to push past it and just ask for it? So that was another thing that came up for me throughout my time that I'm like, oh, it's so interesting that I'm so in my head about this, and this actually came up as conditioning that I needed to work through in order to feel really confident going into this event. Like it actually happened prior to it, like even just with things on like at the airport, in the plane, like asking for a better seat, like random things like that I would never normally do, that I was like, no, you know what? You're going to ask for an upgrade. You're going to go ask for a better seat. You're going to go ask for another drink. Like you're going to go to the Amex lounge and get access. Like there's so many things that I was like, no, I'm going to challenge myself to do that this time. And so that was really awesome to be able to do that. Now, were all responses positive? No. And that's okay. It doesn't matter. But I asked, right? Then they had a speaker come on stage, and he is a keynote speaker. So he actually helps people create keynote speeches. and helps people tell stories on stage that change the world. And he had such a beautiful way of communicating your pitch. So he was getting everyone ready to actually communicate what it is that they do and who they help. But my biggest takeaway from him, and his name was Mike Ganino, my biggest takeaway from him was actually learning to share your opinion that sets you apart from everybody else, even in your pitch. Because if you don't communicate what it is that you do differently, people don't remember you. So to be more memorable, you've got to have that specific opinion that comes through. And I was like, oh, I really like this. And it makes so much sense. Like when it comes to like your personal brand, it comes to your social media, it comes to anything that you do, if you're not communicating your point of difference, then people don't know where you fit. People don't know how to serve you, how to support you, how to refer people to you. And the way that he spoke about it really resonated with me, because it was like, what's your specific opinion, right? Like, what is your specific opinion in the area of work that you work, or the way that you support people, or the outcome that you create for people? What's your specific opinion about it? And how can you communicate that? And I was like, oh, I love that concept, because it allowed it just to kind of like hit home one level further, to be like, oh, okay, yeah, what is my specific opinion? Because I've been working on this with my coach recently around my personal brand and what my specific opinion is and how I can create more authority content and be that go-to person in the industry. And one of them is like really learning to share your experience and share your specific opinions. And so it was nice for that confirmation to also come through Mike's speech as well. Then they brought on the epic, incredible Brendon Burchard. Now, Brendon, I have followed for a really long time. I've read so many of his books, one of my favorite books being High Performance Habits. If you have not read it, you need to read it. It is a game changer. And I loved everything that he shared. He had so many incredible nuggets of wisdom, and how like they originally started talking about like expanding your network and how he approaches expanding his network. And the way that he actually really like focuses on playing the long game, and how much time he actually spends every single week nurturing his network. I was so blown away. Like, you would think at his level of success and that he wouldn't necessarily be working as much on his network as much. I would imagine that he would just be getting people coming to him constantly. And so he wouldn't really need to work on that. And so it was really, really beautiful to hear him talk about like every Friday he sets aside a couple of hours where he checks in with people from a place of value and a service, and considers how he can add value to their lives. I was like, wow, like that blows my mind. Like how he talked about how he would, message Laurie, or he message Chris, or he texts other people in his network that he wants to continue to keep that relationship strong. And so he would reach out and be like, hey, how's your week been? How can I help you this week? What's something that you need at the moment? What are you working on at the moment? And he would ask really powerful questions to get them to come to the conversation in a really beautiful way. And I just love that he dedicates that time to do that. And I was like, far out, I need to do more of that. And I'm going to talk about more like the follow-up and connections in a moment, because I had some other really massive breakthroughs around that too. So we spoke about like your circle of influence and how much you have access to within your circle of influence without even realizing it. And I think it's one of those things that we just don't really look at as elements of value, and we don't consider how it can serve us in the long run. I think a lot of people are too focused on transactional networking, and rather than it being really connection-based networking that's playing the long game. And I think the other huge piece or nugget that he shared that really resonated with me with regards to this is that he said, stop looking at it from a point of ROI. It's got nothing to do with ROI. Your ROI has already been calculated. You want to do it from a place of giving from a place of truly wanting to give, not giving to get. And I was like, hell yeah, like I freaking love that. And I try to communicate this with my mastermind ladies, because like sometimes when we're in scarcity, all we can do is focus on the transaction, and we're focusing on trying to get because we're in scarcity. And this comes through in relationships too, right? Like it's not just money. It's in everything that we do sometimes. And so when we're in that energy, we're in that energy of like trying to get, and you can feel that energy from people. Like I 100% know that you have experienced this, and you can feel that energy when you know that someone's just in it to get. And so I like to like step back and go like, how can I actually look at this from the long point of view and go, rather than like, what am I getting out of this? And I was talking to a client about this the other day, and she was talking about offering a masterclass for a community that she wants to present to. And they were asking her what her price point for that is, or what she charges for that. And she was like, oh my God, I don't even know what to charge. And I said to her, like, could this be just adding to the bank of value that could turn in ROI down the track? Like, could this be like, do they have ideal clients in their audience? Is it actually something that it's about nourishing that relationship that will absolutely come back to you twofold down the track? And if it is, like, you don't have to charge for it if you don't want to, or you can charge low ticket. And that way it's just something that you do from a place of value and just giving back. So I just love that. And I think that we need to do more of that more often rather than thinking of it from a place of ROI, just thinking about it from those places of nurturing those relationships. And then that brings me to the next point, which really hit home for me, was he talked about like how good people become great. So rather than looking around the room and going like, who's the best person that I can connect with? Who is the person that's, an 8-figure entrepreneur or a 7-figure entrepreneur? Rather than thinking about like just going to those really high level people that you think like, that's where I'm going to get the best ROI, that's where I'm going to get the most from connecting with these people. He said, don't discount the people around you that are in your circles that are currently good. They're really, really good at what they do, and they're going to absolutely become great because good people become great. And I was like, holy hell, like that so resonated with me on so many levels, because I think sometimes I get caught up in the Australian networks, and this is something that like absolute transparency and honesty. Like I feel like sometimes I get stuck in the hole. I feel like I'm the big fish sometimes because also like the people that I surround myself with aren't necessarily as super ambitious as I am. And so I have certain friends that I'm connected with that are ambitious, that are doing more than I'm doing and are doing better than I'm doing. And so I look at those people and I think about it from that, like I want to have them in my network because I know that I can learn from them and grow with them. And then sometimes I can get a little bit in the headspace of like, where am I spending my time? And I don't want to be like that. Like I really want to look at it from a place of like, these people are good at what they do, and absolutely surrounding myself with them is not going to make me any worse, right? And it's not going to be detrimental to my growth. And so trusting in that. And I think that, and I actually said this to Brendan as well, because we were doing like takeaways from the session, and I put my hand up and actually shared with him that I really needed to hear that, because I actually haven't maximized the networks that I'm a part of in Australia as well as I could have. And yet I'm already going to America to try to maximize these networks. And it was really like a call to action for me to be like, you know what, like you need to go back and actually look at the networks that you're a part of and add value in those networks, because you're not doing that as effectively as you could be, because you're looking for the great instead of looking for the good. And so I said to him, like, I really needed that reminder, because I am surrounded by amazing, amazing people that just haven't grown yet. It doesn't mean they won't. And so I love that, because it was a beautiful reminder to be like, you know what, stick with them, stay with them and grow with them and call them forward and be that person that like guides them up to the next level, and you can grow with them and they'll probably surpass you. And so sometimes I just needed to hear that. So I said to him, I needed to really hear that, because I've come all this way from Australia and I am wanting to expand my network, but I probably haven't expanded my networks as well as I possibly could in Australia. And he was like, wow, thank you so much, one, for traveling this far. And also like, thank you so much for sharing that, because sometimes we don't realize how good we've got it where we do have it. And so he was saying like, you don't realize that Christine's traveled all this way from Australia, and it would literally be like asking you to travel to Europe for a one-day event. And everyone was like, oh my God, I wouldn't do that. But that's the value of what I see in where I spend my time and who I spend my time with. And so I know that surrounding myself with incredible people will benefit me in the long run, and it's worthwhile. And I love it. Like, it's just absolutely a fun thing to do as well. And I think that rather than always looking like the grass is always greener, really just focus on like the good people that are already around you, because you grow with those people. And then Chris and Laurie also spoke to this as well, because they were like, when we first started out, they joined a mastermind with Lewis Howes, and he has like one of the top rated podcasts in the world. And they were saying like, we joined this podcast, we joined this mastermind, and the other incredible people in that group became great, but they weren't at the time. They were like, we didn't know who they were. They were, up and comers, but then they've become the Amy Porterfields, the Jenna Kutchers, the Jasmine Stars. Like, they've become these next level people. But I think sometimes we can be so quick to just look around to be like, oh, let's go over there because the grass seems greener, instead of actually nurturing the relationships that you have right now, because the people that you're surrounding yourself with will become great if you stay. And so just staying invested in those relationships is really key. So that was another really big takeaway from Brendan. And then the next one was, find what you love and bring people to it. I really love this, and I feel like it's something that I do with my business, because I am a big believer of creating more connection. Like, I really think about my values and go, okay, how do I live into my values within my business? And some of my highest values being growth, being connection, and being freedom. And I think about like, how do I bring people into that. And so like, I've always loved connection dinners. I've always loved connection events, and I've always loved retreats. So I've like, how do I build this and bring people to it, right? And so I love that he also does this. So he actually started a get together with some mates basically, and they went into the wilderness and basically had like a boys' weekend away. And the people who were there started posting about it, and everyone else was like, "Oh my God, how do I be a part of this?" And so then he ended up creating an event similar to it, where it was just connection and activities and bringing people together to have really high level conversations. And it just happened out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh my God, that's how my mastermind started. And that's how the retreat started, right? So I feel like sometimes we need that reminder as well. Like, just bring people into it. Like, do things that you love, and that love of what you're doing will absolutely magnetize people to you. And so it's absolutely worthwhile creating a business like that. And so I was like, oh, I feel like I already do this, and it's so good, because I love that he was talking about how he just consistently just brings people to what he's already doing. And so he was even talking about how like he runs these 1 day and 2 day events, and how he'll actually invite some of his friends or connections or people who are part of his network to come backstage and to come hang out as part of the event. So he gets to hang out with them too, because then he's actually maximizing the time spent. And that way he's also not overexerting himself to try and connect with people all the time. And I was like, oh, I love that he was like, okay, so how can I bring more people into what I'm doing, rather than getting stuck in like, oh, it's just for paid people. Like, no, like, how can I actually just create more communities and more opportunities to connect with people? It's just so good. Okay, the next one was, I love the way that he talked about his schedule. So he actually doesn't speak to anyone other than his partner and the people in his everyday life until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I just love this. So he basically has his like long ass morning routine where he, wakes up, meditates, does his journaling, goes and works out, does all his morning routine and whatnot. And then by the time he then starts work, it's like 1 o'clock. So his team don't get access to him. Like, nobody can call him or contact him before 1 p.m. And then he smashes out his work in the afternoon, and then he's done. Like, I just love that. And so he also said that it gives me space and time, because sometimes he's like, I'll do my morning routine and I'll be finished that morning routine by 10 or whatever it might be. And then he's like, I will focus on needle moving activities before 1 o'clock, before my phone opens up to whoever I need to speak to. So he was like, I focus on getting all of those needle moving activities done by 1 o'clock before I open myself up to the rest of the world. And I was like, oh, that's so good, because so often we just literally look straight at our phone, we look at our Instagram DMs, we look at our email and get so caught up in the world and respond to everybody else, instead of actually going, what do I need to work on right now that's going to move the needle forward in my life, in my business? And so I love that he really still has such strong boundaries around that, and creates that next level of boundary, so that he can continue to do great work in the world. Because like he talked about, like, he wants to continue to create and continue to do things that really make a big impact. And to do that, he has to have space and creativity to do that. So he was like, I can't be available 24/7 for other people to respond. So he's like, I've built out my business so I don't have to do that. And that way I can just literally wait till 1 o'clock, and then I let people in. And usually that makes people much more self-sufficient, because they're like, well, I can't contact Brendan until 1 o'clock, so I may as well try and work it out myself. So that was really awesome that he spoke about that, because that was just like, holy hell, I can't believe that 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when he actually starts talking to people. And then he spoke about other like sales strategies and his millionaire messenger process and his book, bits and pieces. So I won't go into that today, because I'm going to do another episode on sales. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Otherwise, I just want to let you know as well, I have a new masterclass happening this Thursday and Friday. So if you haven't checked it out yet, and you are a service-based business owner that has a high ticket service, so what I mean by that is that you charge more than $1,000 for your service. So that could be one-to-one service. Maybe you do a retainer, a package, if you're a coach, consultant, creative, a marketer, like anyone that basically has a service that is over $1,000. So this masterclass is 3 secrets to authentic high ticket sales without being salesy or pushy. In this market that we're in right now, people are being much more discerning, they're being much more skeptical, and so we need to get really good as business owners to support people through the decision-making process, and that means leveling up your sales skills and your sales strategies. So I'm going to be taking you through that in the masterclass happening on Thursday and Friday. So if you haven't checked it out, the link is in the show notes. Register, it's complimentary, jump on and join me and get your questions answered as well. Looking forward to smashing out this awesome masterclass with you. All right, so what were my other biggest takeaways? My other biggest takeaways were follow up. Holy hell, I had such a great conversation with my beautiful friend Shannon, and she's going to come on the podcast as well. And she spoke to me, basically talked through the step-by-step process that she has followed for the last however many events that she's been a part of and masterminds that she's been a part of, and how she utilizes the incredible communities that she's a part of, but she follows up and she's very consistent and she is very intentional with the way that she develops the relationships to serve the growth of her business, but also to give back and add value. This honestly was so amazing to hear, like the step by step, because sometimes I'm like, I have such a practical brain and I'm like, but I want to know what you did next. Like, and then what did you do? And so I was able to like fully pick her brain. We spent the afternoon walking down Santa Monica Pier and down to Venice Beach. And so we just chatted. And I literally picked her brain of how she's had incredible guests on her podcast and how she's made these next level connections and how she's scaled her business. And so she shared with me so many incredible things. And one of my biggest takeaways from chatting with her was really making the time to add value to those communities and add value, show up and be seen in those communities, and also to follow up like crazy. Don't let it go by the wayside. She said she dedicates time throughout the week consistently to be able to nurture and nourish those relationships in simple ways like showing people love on their posts. And I think sometimes we can get so busy doing all the 50 million things, whereas it doesn't take much to dedicate that 10 minutes to just jump in and go, these are 3 people that I'm going to follow up with today. And these are 3 people that I'm just going to go show some love and support them. And so what I see is what Shannon does really well is that she's always like sharing Laurie's stuff. She's sharing other people's stuff. She's commenting on people's posts on social media. She's serving them. Like, she's literally adding value. And I was like, I have been so slack with that. That is terrible, Christine. And so I'm really going to dedicate more time to do that on a regular basis, because I feel I can see the impact and the value that it's created for her business. But I also just want to be that type of person that's not just in it for the business. I really want to be able to be the person who is adding value to other people in their communities too, and in ways that nourish that relationship, because I am a big, big believer in developing relationships over everything. So I hope this episode has really resonated with you, and I hope that it's given you a couple of different ideas on really how to maximize every opportunity that you go into, because I'm sure that you go to other networking events, but maybe you don't have a clear ask. Maybe you're not really prepared for that event. Maybe you're not thinking about it from a business perspective. Maybe you're not asking for what it is that you want. Maybe you're not adding value. Maybe you're not following up. Like, there are so many different things that you could be doing that will serve the growth of your business that, but we just get caught up in all the things of why we're so busy. Whereas these are some of the needle moving activities that really make a difference for your business, and the people who prioritize them are the ones that grow. So if you really want to grow, this is your call to action to make sure that you dedicate that time to nurture your networks. So I hope that this resonates with you, and I hope that you have loved my debrief of the LA trip. Oh, there was actually a couple of things I was going to share with you with regards to traveling and running a business while traveling as well. Sorry. Okay, so a couple of different things that I did to prepare for travel, obviously, was get my team super prepared. And one of the things is also looking way ahead of time. So I knew this trip was coming up, so it really was well planned. I actually didn't have any mastermind sessions booked on the week that I was in LA. And also I traveled to Hawaii, and it was later in the week. So I actually had no client sessions because I actually don't see clients on a Friday anyway. So it didn't impact my business in that way. One of the other things I did as well is make sure that I really checked the time zone so I could be prepared with when I was going to be available to answer questions from my team, to also jump into my communities in my masterminds and add value, answer questions, and coach. So as part of my masterminds, they get access to me via Slack, and they can ask questions, submit things for review, basically get support when they need it. And so I need to dedicate time within my week to make that happen. And so obviously, while traveling on a different time zone, I needed to be conscious of like, okay, so at what time of the day am I going to need to be available to jump on my phone and just spend a little bit of time engaging there? And so with that, it worked out so well in America, honestly, because basically all morning was free for me to do whatever I wanted to do. And it wasn't until like 2:00 in the afternoon that Australia was awake and they were into the workday, that then I basically spent probably 30 minutes in the afternoon between like 2 and 4 and basically engaging then. And then again in the evening, which is fine for me because I'm such an evening person. So then at 7:00 at night, I also spent another half an hour because it was like the end of the day. And so I'd spend another half an hour just responding to people, answering questions and doing bits and pieces there. So that's what really worked really well for me. I also then let people know ahead of time when I wasn't going to be available. So there was two things where, one, the event day where I was going to be in the event all day, and then we had a break to get ready for dinner. And so I also jumped in then and actually responded to messages then. And then also the day of travel on my way home. So when I flew home, it was a Monday here. And so I missed the whole day. And so basically I jumped in the day before. I jumped in actually on the Friday and let them know that obviously that was going to happen. And then also just answered any other questions and then mentioned that I'd be jumping straight on Tuesday morning to answer any questions that they had. So I was just overly communicating. So then people knew exactly when they're going to get the best response and also what to expect. So then there's never anyone disappointed. And the other thing obviously was making sure that I have access to Wi-Fi no matter where I went. So I got a SIM card before I left, and that SIM card had data, so that was not an issue at all. So I had data on my phone, and then also every hotel was staying at a nice hotel, so they all had Wi-Fi. I also actually signed up to Hilton Honors, which is like a loyalty program for the Hilton, because I was staying at two Hiltons, and with Hilton Honors you get free Wi-Fi and water upon arrival. But at the Hawaii one, they didn't give me water. So, so there was those types of things that I just looked ahead of time to make sure that that was going to be okay. The other thing, I had actually planned to do some writing while I was away. I was going to be working on my book, but I just didn't have the right headspace for it, to be honest. Like I caught a bit of a cold on the way over to Hawaii. And so I really just wasn't my full capacity mentally while I was in Hawaii. And so I actually didn't do any writing in my book at all. So what I'm actually doing now is dedicating some time each weekend to really make sure that I've dedicated a couple of hours every weekend just to write, because I really want to get that book out ASAP. What was the other things that I did? I think that's pretty much it, to be honest. Like I took my laptop, obviously, made sure that I had all the connections that I needed to have. And the way that I run my business now is I didn't actually have any one-on-one clients at the time. Actually, yes, I did. But I didn't have any sessions booked with them throughout my time in travel. I'd let them know ahead of time that I was taking that time off. So I think it was just being overly communicating to my clients. Whereas when I was in Arizona, like I had sessions booked because it was a longer trip, whereas I just knew I had so the other thing I did is actually let my phone change over to the new time zone, but I kept my laptop at the old time zone. So I kept that in Australian time zone. So then I had one on either, so that way I could make sure that I was across everything. And then that way the time let me know, obviously, when I had sessions booked. And so there were times where I was in Arizona and Sedona that I had mastermind sessions that I was running, as well as one-on-one coaching sessions. And I just had them booked in my calendar, like no big deal. I just knew I was working that day. And so I would be super prepared. And the way that it worked time zone wise was great, because I had all morning to go out and about and do whatever I needed to do. And then in the afternoon into the evening is when I had my sessions. So traveling throughout the States was really handy. And obviously I stayed on the West Coast. So the time zone was really great. Now, if I'd been on the East Coast over in America, like obviously New York, Miami, that side of the country, that would be a very different story. That would be much harder. And I think Europe would be much harder as well, because it's literally flipped. So I think it's just being conscious of how you plan your work days. So yeah, so I hope that adds value. I hope that if you are someone that really wants to travel while you're working, like, yeah, build your business to be online. Honestly, it's so worthwhile, and I'm so glad that I get to do this. It's honestly the reason why I wanted to create an online business. But then I also really want to live into my values of freedom and growth. And so going to events like this just changes the way that I feel about myself within my business. It changes my viewpoints, my vision, and the way that I show up in my business. And so I am always wanting to be someone that loves personal development and will always be attending events like this. So to allow my business to also be something that I can work around and take wherever it is that I want to go is paramount for me. Like, that's why I absolutely have created it and set it up the way that I've set it up. So I hope this resonates with you. And if you are wanting to travel more, absolutely go and do it. Like, make it happen. And one of the biggest things I think is people are okay. Like, people are totally okay if things don't work out. Like if I had Wi-Fi issues or whatever it might be, I don't think people would have cared so much, because I add so much value in other times that they get what they need. So if I was not available for 2 hours one evening, it's no big deal, because I'm not running that session online. It's actually just through the community Slack, and there's I've communicated ahead of time that they get a response within 48 hours. Now, my go-to is usually within 24 hours, I'll get a response. And same with my one-on-one clients, I'll get a response within that day. But I've set it up with the expectation that it's 48 hours. So I'm still delivering on what it is that I'm going to be delivering on. And so I think that that's really key, is that you just be really conscious of what you promise. Because if you know that you're going to be traveling, or you're going to be running a business that you're going to be traveling, that you are conscious of what you're promising, so then you're not available 24/7. I also don't think you should be available 24/7, because it's not really sustainable in your business. But yes, I hope that this resonated with you. I hope you loved my lessons, and I'd love to hear what you took away from it. So make sure you send me a DM. Otherwise, come and join me for the masterclass happening on Thursday and Friday. The link is in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have an amazing afternoon. Thank you for listening, and if you found any value out of this episode, make sure you hit the follow button so you get access to the episodes as soon as they are live, and make sure you come hang out with me on Instagram. You can find me at ChristineCorcoran_coach. Have an incredible week.